Um, so what if I told you that the reason you didn't ask for that promotion today, or, well, the reason you didn't speak up in that argument with your partner isn't because you're afraid of being rejected?
Right, which is what we always assume it is.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
We always assumed it's rejection. But what if the reality is just a whole lot stranger? What if your brain is actually, like, addicted to the safety of being overlooked, of being underpaid and misunderstood?
I mean, it is a really jarring premise to accept because we all want to believe, that we are constantly striving for the best possible outcome for ourselves.
We want to be the hero of our own story.
Right. But when we look at the raw mechanics of human behavior, we find this massive contradiction between what we consciously desire and what our nervous system will actually permit us to do.
And that contradiction is really our mission for today's deep dive.
Mm.
We are unpacking the psychological architecture behind what we are calling the defeat habit.
Yeah, or the loser habit, as some sources refer to it.
Right. We're exploring this fascinating phenomenon where highly capable people just find themselves trapped in this loop, like repeating the exact same mistake, shrinking into the background, and silently building up all this resentment.
Which is incredibly common, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. So if you are someone who constantly promises yourself that you will act differently next time, only to just watch yourself recreate the exact same frustrating scenario, this deep dive is going specifically into the invisible gears driving those choices.
It's about decoding that invisible machinery.
Yeah. So let's look at the foundational mystery here. If failing is so incredibly painful, like if we hate it so much, why do we actively construct situations where we fail in the exact same way over and over again?
Well, the answer requires us to fundamentally rethink how the brain calculates risk and how it calculates pain.
Okay, how so?
Well, we tend to think of the brain as this success-seeking engine, like it's always trying to win. But it is not. It is a prediction engine.
A prediction engine, meaning it just wants to know what's going to happen next.
Exactly. Its primary job from a purely evolutionary standpoint is to minimize surprise and conserve energy.
Right, because surprises out in the wild usually meant you were about to get eaten.
Yeah, exactly. Variables and unknowns require a massive amount of metabolic energy to process. So when you try a completely new approach to a problem, say setting a hard boundary with a really demanding boss, you are introducing a massive variable.
Because you have no idea how they'll react.
Right. You have no data. They might yell, they might fire you, or they might cry.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a lot of variables.
And the brain registers that unpredictability as a literal mortal threat.
So the brain essentially looks at the unknown, calculates the potential for catastrophic, unpredictable emotional damage, and just slams on the brakes.
It initiates a full system override. It's like, no, we are not doing this. But then you contrast that with your usual pattern.
The thing you always do.
Right. Maybe your usual pattern is just staying quiet, taking on the extra work, and burning out. Well, your brain has a massive, highly detailed file on that exact scenario.
It knows exactly how bad it's going to hurt.
Yes. It knows you will be exhausted, and it knows you will be resentful. But crucially, it knows you will survive. The pain is entirely mapped out.
I am really trying to visualize this mechanism, and it reminds me of, well, living in an old apartment with a notoriously leaky roof.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Like every time it rains, water drips right onto the middle of the living room floor.
Oh.
Now, fixing the roof requires calling a contractor, spending an unknown amount of money. Maybe they discover black mold. You have to tear down the drywall.
The variables are terrifying.
Right. The unknown is huge. So instead of fixing the roof, you just put a plastic bucket under the leak.
And you just live with it.
Yeah. You hate the bucket. You trip over it constantly. It completely ruins the aesthetic of your home. But the bucket is a known misery. You know exactly how much water it holds and exactly when to empty it.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. We are essentially choosing the bucket over the unpredictability of the repair.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is, but it makes biological sense. The bucket becomes your baseline. Over time, that specific, familiar misery actually functions as a comfort zone.
Wait, really? A comfort zone? But it's miserable.
See, this is where we have a major societal misconception. We think a comfort zone is a place of luxury and happiness, like lounging on a tropical beach with a drink.
Right, that's what I picture when someone says comfort zone.
But in neurobiology, a comfort zone is simply a state of emotional homeostasis. It is just a safe zone from the unexpected. You can be absolutely miserable inside your comfort zone, provided the misery is predictable.
That is a genuinely terrifying thought. You can be comfortably miserable for your entire life.
Yeah, as long as there are no surprises.
But wait, if we recognize the bucket is there and we actively hate tripping over it every day, why doesn't our conscious desire to grow just override that primitive safety mechanism? Like, I want a better life. Why isn't that desire enough?
Well, because safety and growth require fundamentally different operating systems,
Right.
and they just cannot run simultaneously.
They cancel each other out.
Essentially, yeah. Growth requires you to willingly walk into a state of high unpredictability. It requires neuroplasticity, which is metabolically expensive, and it's emotionally volatile.
It takes a lot of fuel.
Exactly. Safety, on the other hand, requires strict adherence to the established neural pathways. You cannot possess the predictable safety of an old mistake and the expansive growth of a new choice at the exact same time.
You have to pick one.
You have to. And when push comes to shove, under moments of actual stress, the nervous system will always prioritize immediate, predictable safety over some abstract future growth.
Okay, let me apply this to the immediate aftermath of making a familiar mistake, because I think this is where the cycle gets deeply frustrating for you, the listener, and honestly for me too.
Right. The aftermath is crucial.
So let's say I trip over the bucket again. Like, I didn't speak up in the meeting when I really wanted to. I walk back to my desk, and I immediately start mentally berating myself. I feel immense guilt.
You beat yourself up.
Yeah, and I tell myself this very convincing story. I say, okay, I see what happened. I was a coward. I have learned my lesson. Next week, I am absolutely raising my hand.
And you mean it in that moment.
I totally mean it. We do this constantly. But then next week arrives, the meeting starts, the exact same scenario plays out, and we freeze again. Why does that mental lesson just evaporate the second we actually need it?
To understand that failure, we have to look at the severe biological disconnect between cognitive realization and somatic action.
Okay, break that down for me. Cognitive versus somatic.
Sure, so writing those mental apology letters at your desk, swearing you'll be braver next time, experiencing profound guilt, all of that is happening in your prefrontal cortex.
The logical part of the brain.
Right. It is a purely cognitive intellectual exercise. You are just generating a narrative about your behavior. But behavior itself under stress is not driven by the prefrontal cortex at all.
It's not. Then what drives it?
It is driven by the basal ganglia, which is the habit center, and the amygdala, which is the threat detection center.
So I am essentially writing this beautiful, highly articulate software update for my brain.
Huh.
But I'm typing it on a keyboard that isn't actually plugged into the computer.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The habit center never even receives the code.
Wow, it just goes into the void.
Yeah. The habit center operates in milliseconds. It relies on deeply entrenched neural grooves, which we often refer to as muscle memory.
Right, the stuff you do without thinking.
Exactly. So when the stimulus of the stressful meeting hits, the basal ganglia deploys your default avoidance behavior before your prefrontal cortex even has time to boot up the new lesson you learned last week.
Because the body moves infinitely faster than conscious thought.
Precisely. You react before you can think about how you promised you'd react.
I have to challenge something here, though. Because we place a lot of cultural value on guilt.
Oh, we definitely do.
We assume that if someone feels truly deeply guilty about a mistake, it proves they have a moral compass. Like it acts as a guarantee that they will change. Are you saying that feeling guilty is actually useless?
I am suggesting something even more provocative than that. In the context of the defeat habit, guilt isn't just useless. It is an active form of procrastination.
Wait, guilt is procrastination? How does that even work?
Well, think about what happens when you feel intense guilt and engage in heavy self-reflection. Your brain actually releases a small hit of dopamine.
Really? From feeling bad?
Yes, because you have resolved the cognitive dissonance. You told yourself, I did a bad thing, but because I feel so bad about it, I am still a good person who is actively working on it.
Oh, wow.
You get the psychological reward of feeling productive and morally upright without having to take on the terrifying, unpredictable risk of actually changing your physical behavior.
So you substitute the emotion of regret for the actual mechanics of change.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
trick yourself into feeling like you've done the hard work just because you suffered a little bit at your desk.
That is incredibly sneaky of the brain. So if the mental apology is a trap and guilt is just emotional procrastination, how do we actually plug the keyboard into the computer? Like, how do we get the lesson into the habit center?
The mechanism required is a rigorous translation process. You must convert one abstract cognitive lesson into one highly specific physical action.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
Well, the brain does not understand vague directives like, I need to be more assertive. That is a concept. It's not an instruction.
Right. The brain needs something concrete.
Exactly. The basal ganglia needs a physical cue. So the translation has to be something like, when the client interrupts me today, I will physically place both hands flat on the desk, look directly at the center of their forehead, and say the words, please let me finish.
Oh, I see. It has to be choreography.
It has to be choreography.
Hmm.
Without the physical translation, the lesson remains just a ghost in the machine.
You have to act it out in the real world.
Yeah, you have to force the body to execute a new physical movement in space to begin carving a new neural pathway. And that requires stepping out of the safe zone and risking a completely new, unpredictable reaction from your environment.
Which brings us right back to why we avoid it in the first place.
Exactly.
Well, let's track how this physical avoidance plays out in the real world. Because it doesn't just look like someone sweating nervously in a meeting.
No, it shapes your entire life structure.
Yeah, it actually dictates where we position ourselves in society, in our families, and in our careers. And I want to look closely at a very specific archetype that emerges from this habit,
Which one?
the number 2 spot. The perpetual right-hand man, the supportive best friend, the co-pilot who absolutely refuses to take the yoke.
Yes. This is where the psychological self-deception becomes incredibly sophisticated.
Because it looks so good from the outside.
It does. Society overwhelmingly praises the number 2 position. We label people who constantly step aside as peacemakers. We call them empathetic, collaborative, low-ego team players.
Wait, I have to push back hard on this. Because every organization, every healthy family dynamic relies on people willing to play a supporting role.
That is true.
Like, if everyone demands to be the visionary number 1, the entire system just collapses into a chaotic power struggle.
Yeah.
So there is genuine virtue in being a great number 2.
Yeah.
Are we pathologizing humility here?
That is the critical distinction we have to make. We are absolutely not pathologizing genuine humility or the strategic, conscious choice to support a leader.
Okay, good. So what's the difference?
We have to look at the internal machinery driving the behavior. Because, from the outside, someone who is genuinely secure and chooses to be number 2 looks mechanically identical to someone who is terrified of exposure and hides in the number 2 spot.
Right. The choreography is exactly the same. They both step out of the spotlight.
Exactly. So how do we diagnose the difference?
Yeah. If a listener's sitting there right now thinking, I'm a supportive team player, I'm not hiding, what is the internal litmus test for them?
The diagnostic tool is the presence of an invisible, silent reservoir of resentment.
Resentment.
Yes. Let's examine choice versus avoidance. When a healthy individual assesses a situation, recognizes someone else has better skills for the moment, and makes a conscious choice to yield the floor, the transaction is clean.
They don't walk away mad.
Right. They do not carry emotional baggage away from that interaction. They feel aligned with their decision.
But when it's avoidance, when it's the defeat habit?
When it is avoidance masquerading as peacemaking, the transaction is toxic. You step back because your brain triggered that overriding fear of unpredictable failure.
The leaky roof bucket again.
Yes, you smile, you say, oh no, you take the lead, I'm happy to help. But internally, a ledger is opened. You begin to hoard grievances.
You start keeping score.
Exactly. You start feeling underappreciated. You start viewing the person who took the number 1 spot, the very spot you voluntarily handed to them, as arrogant or selfish.
Wow.
The resentment ferments because your outward behavior is a lie designed to protect your nervous system.
You are secretly billing people for a sacrifice they didn't even ask you to make.
That is a perfect way to phrase it.
That is incredibly common. I mean, we've all felt that or known someone who does that. But why is the number 2 spot so magnetic for someone trapped in this avoidance loop? Like, what specific protection does it offer?
It offers the ultimate insurance policy against the devastation of the ego. It offers plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability.
Think about the architecture of accountability. If you are the number 1, the visionary, the leader, and the project completely fails, the failure is entirely yours.
It's all on your shoulders.
It is a direct, unfiltered strike against your competence and your identity. But the number 2 spot is a buffered zone.
I see. You get proximity to the power. You get to bask in the glow if the project succeeds. But if the whole thing burns down to the ground, you have this culturally accepted escape hatch.
Exactly. You can just shrug.
You can just say, hey, I only advised them. It wasn't my final call.
Precisely. You insulate your ego from the ultimate sting of failure. But the tragedy of this strategy is the long-term cost.
What happens long term?
By continually opting for the buffered zone of the number 2 spot, You are engaging in a slow, imperceptible surrender of your own agency.
You're giving away your power.
Yes, you are handing the steering wheel of your life, your career, your relationships, over to other people, simply so you don't have to be the one holding it if the car crashes.
You guarantee you'll never be blamed for a crash, but you also guarantee you will never actually drive to a destination of your own choosing.
You become a permanent passenger in your own life.
And this introduces a massive psychological contradiction. Because if the number 2 spot is so safe, so highly insured, and so comfortable, why does it generate that resentment you mentioned earlier?
Right. Why aren't we just happy there?
Yeah, if our brains just wanted safety, we should be perfectly content sitting in the passenger seat forever. But we aren't. We are miserable there.
The resentment is the smoke that proves there is a fire. And the fire is the fact that underneath all the avoidance and the fear, the individual actually possesses an incredibly high level of pride.
Okay, let's define pride in this context. Because usually when we think of pride, we think of arrogance. We think of someone walking around bragging about their accomplishments, pumping their chest.
Right, that's the common definition.
But the dynamic, we're analyzing couples, massive pride with absolutely zero confidence. How does that even work?
We need to decouple pride from arrogance for a second. In this psychological profile, pride is entirely internalized. It is the rigidly held vision of your ideal self.
Your ideal self, like who you could be.
Yes, it is the blueprint of who you believe you are fundamentally capable of being, or who you should be if the world were fair and all your potential was magically unlocked.
So it's an internal standard. It's like looking at the summit of a mountain and knowing in your bones that the peak is your rightful place. Your pride is the belief that you belong at the top of that mountain.
Yes, and the higher that ideal self is positioned, the greater the distance between the peak and your current unpolished, flawed reality at the bottom of the mountain.
That's quite a gap.
It is a massive gap. And here is where the total deficit of confidence creates paralysis. Confidence is not a belief. It is a behavioral output. Lacking confidence means you are absolutely terrified of the sheer clumsiness required to move.
I feel like everyone can relate to this. You look down at your feet, you look at the thousands of grueling, embarrassing, sweaty steps it will take just to get up that mountain.
And you know you will trip.
You know you will look foolish to the other climbers. And because your pride is so high, because you truly believe you belong at the top, looking foolish at the bottom is physically agonizing to your ego.
So the brain solves the agony through paralysis. You simply refuse to look at the mountain.
You just close your eyes to it.
You refuse to take the first clumsy step, because taking that first step shatters the pristine illusion of your potential.
As long as you never try, you can permanently preserve the fantasy.
Exactly. You can tell yourself, I could have been a world-class climber if I had just wanted to, if I had just tried.
We would rather do absolutely nothing and preserve the fantasy of our untouched potential than do something poorly and be forced to confront the reality of our current limitations.
It's self-preservation.
Our own pride acts as a roadblock. Like, if I cannot execute this perfectly, in a manner worthy of my ideal self, I will not execute it at all.
And this paralysis is compounded by how a lack of confidence warps our perception of time and consequence.
What do you mean by that?
When you have zero confidence, you don't just project realistic failure into the future. You engage in catastrophic forecasting.
Oh, I do this all the time.
Most of us do. The imaginary failure you conjure in your mind swells to become many times larger, more public, and more devastating than any actual failure could ever be.
We turn a minor stumble on the trail into a scenario where we fall off a 1,000-foot cliff and take our whole family down with us.
Which logically leads to the conclusion, I cannot take action until I have the confidence to face that cliff.
Which sounds completely reasonable in the moment.
It does, but this is the ultimate misunderstanding of how human psychology actually operates. We treat confidence as a prerequisite for action.
Like it's a requirement.
Yes, we view it as fuel that you must pump into the car before you can turn the key.
Right. We tell ourselves, once I feel confident enough, I'll launch the business. Or once I feel confident enough, I'll ask them out.
But the mechanics are exactly backward. Confidence is not the fuel. It is the exhaust.
Wait, confidence is the exhaust.
It is the byproduct of taking action and surviving.
Yeah.
You can never, ever generate confidence in a vacuum. It is an empirical data set built entirely on the experience of acting, failing, realizing you didn't die, and recalibrating.
So you have to do the thing while you are terrified.
You have to. Waiting for confidence to arrive before you act is a permanent, inescapable trap.
It's like you're standing at the train station waiting for a ship to arrive. It is literally never going to happen.
No, it isn't.
You have to act in the total absence of confidence. You have to endure the humiliating reality of your own clumsiness that hurts your high pride, and only then will the confidence slowly begin to trickle in.
That is the only way out of the loop.
But accepting that clumsiness, like actively pushing through that initial humiliation, requires a massive energy source.
Mm.
And this brings us to an aspect of human nature that most of us have been actively trained to suppress since childhood.
Right, our competitiveness.
Yeah, because if we have that high pride, if we secretly want to be at the peak, it means we are inherently, deeply competitive. We want to win.
Which brings up a really fascinating Japanese concept called meguzurai.
Megazuga.
Yes. It roughly translates to hating to lose or being a sore loser. It is a raw, visceral, competitive drive. And you are correct, most adults possess a profound psychological allergy to their own competitive nature.
We think it's a bad thing.
We view it as toxic, unevolved, and dangerous.
And our entire socialization process dictates this. Like, from kindergarten onward, we are taught to suppress the ego. We are told to be good sports, to clap politely when someone else beats us,
To prioritize the harmony of the group.
Exactly, over our individual desire to triumph. We are told that hiding our inner sore loser is a sign of maturity. But are we saying that this socialization is actually suffocating our potential?
We have to trace the origin of that allergy to understand why it's so damaging.
Oh yeah, let's trace it.
Imagine a 7-year-old child who loses a board game. They want to win so desperately that the loss physically overwhelms them. They cry, they throw the pieces across the room, they shout.
Classic sore loser behavior.
Right. Now, how do the adults in the room typically react to that?
They immediately scold the child. They say, don't be a sore loser. You're ruining the game for everyone else. Be considerate.
Exactly. The adult is just trying to manage the immediate social disruption. They want peace in the living room. But the child internalizes a very different, highly damaging psychological lesson.
What do they internalize?
The child does not learn, I need to regulate my emotions. The child learns, my desire to win makes me a bad person. My competitive fire makes the people I rely on for survival angry at me.
Wow. So it becomes a survival issue.
Yes. To stay safe and retain the affection of the group, the child learns to sever their connection to their own ambition. They learn to smile through defeat.
They learn to fake it.
They learn to voluntarily head straight for the number 2 spot because nobody ever scolds the number 2 for being selfish.
That is heartbreaking, honestly. But burying that fire doesn't extinguish it, right? It just forces it to burn underground.
This is the crux of the issue right here. We have conflated the nature of being competitive with the childish expression of a tantrum.
We threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. Competitiveness itself is not toxic. Hating the feeling of defeat, wanting to impose your will on the world and achieve mastery, is a beautiful, necessary engine for human growth.
It's what drives us forward.
It is the biological imperative to be better today than you were yesterday. When you suppress it out of a misguided sense of politeness, you don't become a saint. You become stagnant.
I really want to explore how that suppressed fire mutates. Because like we said, it doesn't just sit quietly in the dark. It finds a way out.
It always finds a way out.
And it usually emerges as something we feel incredibly guilty about. Envy.
The compass of envy is perhaps the most diagnostic tool we have for identifying a suppressed competitive drive.
The compass of envy. Let's lay out the scenario for the listener. You are scrolling through LinkedIn, or maybe you are at a dinner party, and you see someone operating on the front lines.
Right. Someone taking action.
Yeah. They are taking risks. They are launching a project. Maybe they are even failing publicly and making a fool of themselves, but they are in the arena. And suddenly you feel this hot, twisting sensation in your gut.
A flare of jealousy.
It's a flare of jealousy, a feeling of unease, or even mild disdain for them. And our immediate reaction is to judge ourselves for that feeling. We think, I'm a bitter, malicious person for wishing they would fail. I should be happy for them.
We immediately categorize that feeling as a moral failure. But if we view it through the lens of the defeat habit, that twist in your gut has absolutely nothing to do with malice toward the other person.
It doesn't.
No. It is a distress flare fired from your own suppressed ideal self.
So you aren't actually mad at them for being in the arena. You are mourning the fact that you are too terrified to leave the stands.
The envy is just holding up a mirror. Think about it. If you genuinely lacked that high pride, if your inner sore loser was truly dead, You wouldn't feel anything when you looked at them.
You would just scroll past.
You would feel total indifference. The fact that their action causes you pain is empirical proof that your desire to act is still alive.
That is profound.
Envy, when stripped of its moral baggage, is simply a compass. It points with terrifying accuracy toward the exact things you value and the life you actually want to live.
So the listener's internal monologue needs to radically shift here. When they feel that pang of jealousy, looking at a colleague who got the promotion, instead of spiraling into guilt, the response should be analytical.
Exactly. You become an observer.
You say, I am feeling envy. Data acquired. My inner sore loser is awake, and it is telling me that I want that level of responsibility.
It provides the exact coordinates for your next move.
Okay, let's follow this progression. Because the listener's tracking with us. They understand the brain's addiction to the leaky roof. They know the mental apology is a trick.
Right. The basal ganglia needs choreography.
They see the resentment building in the number 2 spot. They embrace their inner sore loser, and they use their envy as a compass to point toward a new goal. They finally decide to take the leap.
They're ready.
They're going to step out of the safe zone. And the very millisecond they prepare to act, an entirely new defense mechanism deploys to stop them.
Oh, yes, the final boss.
The ultimate psychological armor, the I have no talent shield.
It is the most sophisticated, heavy-duty emergency brake the human ego has ever engineered.
We use this phrase so casually. We say, I'd love to write a book, but I have no talent for writing. Or, I'd love to lead the team, but I just don't have the natural talent for public speaking.
We treat it as an immutable fact.
We treat it like an objective biological fact, like saying, I can't reach the top shelf because I'm only 5'4".
Right.
But we are fundamentally misusing the concept of talent here, aren't we?
We are weaponizing the concept of talent against our own agency. Declaring I have no talent is almost never an empirical assessment of your actual cognitive or physical abilities.
Because we haven't actually tested it.
Exactly. You haven't done the 10,000 hours of rigorous testing required to actually determine your biological baseline. I have no talent is a highly convenient, pre-packaged excuse designed to instantly absolve you from the guilt of retreating.
Because if it is a matter of talent, it is entirely out of your hands. It is the genetic lottery. The universe simply didn't bless you.
And therefore, you are off the hook.
Therefore, you cannot be held morally or professionally responsible for failing to try. You get a free pass to stay in your comfort zone of familiar misery, and you get to feel like a victim of fate rather than a coward.
The real genius of the no talent shield becomes obvious when you look at the specific timing of its deployment.
This is the mechanism that fascinated me the most in our research. Because the excuse doesn't just hang around your consciousness all day long.
No, it doesn't.
You aren't thinking, I have no talent, while you're brushing your teeth or making coffee in the morning. It is an acute response.
If a lack of talent were an objective reality you had genuinely made peace with, it would be a constant, dull hum in the background of your life. But it operates exactly like an airbag.
An airbag. Okay, paint that picture.
You are sitting in the boardroom, a problem is raised, you actually have a brilliant, unconventional solution. You take a deep breath to speak.
You're about to do it.
Your heart rate spikes. The amygdala detects the massive variable of unpredictable social failure, and boom, the airbag deploys.
The shield goes up.
A voice in your head screams, "Don't say it. You aren't a creative strategist. You don't have the talent to articulate this properly. You will sound ridiculous."
And so you exhale the breath you took, and you slump back in your chair. The heart rate slows down. The fear subsides. The shield successfully protected the nervous system from the risk.
It did exactly what it was designed to do. It saved you from the unknown.
Once you recognize that the timing is tied exclusively to the spike in fear, the shield completely loses its structural integrity.
It's just smoke and mirrors.
You realize you don't need to engage in a massive philosophical debate with yourself about the nature of your innate abilities. You don't need to read books on finding your hidden genius.
You just need to observe the mechanical deployment of the defense system.
You literally just step back and label the machinery. You say to yourself, I am experiencing a severe spike in physiological fear because I'm about to step into the unknown. As a result, my brain just deployed the talent excuse to pull me back to safety.
You don't fight the excuse, you just render it irrelevant by naming it.
Which leaves you completely naked in the face of the fear. You have bypassed the shield, but the terror of the unpredictable outcome is still right there in the room with you.
Your high pride is still screaming that you must execute perfectly.
And the familiar misery of the old bucket is sitting right next to you, looking incredibly safe. So how do we actually rewrite the code in the habit center without triggering another massive system override?
Because the standard cultural advice here is to go big or go home.
Right. Jump into the deep end.
When people realize they are stuck in a rut, they usually attempt a cinematic, scorched earth life overhaul. They say, I'm quitting my job on Monday, I'm moving to a new city, I'm going to become a completely aggressive, confident number one overnight.
And how does that usually work out?
That approach almost guarantees a relapse into the defeat habit.
Why?
Attempting a massive life overhaul introduces an overwhelming number of terrifying variables all at once. The imaginary failure swells to planetary proportions. The high pride realizes it cannot possibly manage all these new skills perfectly, and the system shuts down.
It's too much data for the brain.
You end up doing absolutely nothing. The solution requires a much stealthier approach. We have to look at the strategy of micro-rebellions.
Micro-rebellions.
We are putting down the sledgehammer and picking up a scalpel.
Exactly. You do not need to demolish the entire foundation of your habit loop. You just need to introduce microscopic, deliberate cracks. You have to sneak past the amygdala's threat detection system by keeping the stakes incredibly low.
So what is the anatomy of a successful micro-rebellion? How does the listener implement this today?
It goes back to our discussion about the translation process.
Yeah.
A micro-rebellion is the translation of one lesson into one tiny physical action that slightly deviates from your normal pattern.
Okay, give me an example. If your normal pattern is to always defer to others on where to eat lunch, your micro-rebellion is to say, actually, I would prefer Thai food today, and then hold eye contact.
That sounds almost absurdly small. Like, how does picking a restaurant change a deeply ingrained psychological habit?
Because you are proving a new mathematical reality to your nervous system. By voicing an opinion and surviving the minor social friction, you are generating empirical data that the unknown is not lethal.
You didn't die because you asked for Thai food.
Exactly. You are generating a microdose of confidence.
It is essentially exposure therapy. You are deliberately touching the hot stove for a millisecond just to prove your hand won't melt off.
Yes, keep it small.
So if your default is the number 2 spot, a micro-rebellion might be offering to lead just the first 5 minutes of the weekly sync, rather than volunteering to run an entire new division.
You step into the front line for 5 minutes and then you step back. But the architecture of your brain has changed. The trajectory has shifted by a fraction of a degree.
A fraction of a degree.
If an airplane leaves Los Angeles for New York and alters its course by just 1 degree, it doesn't look like much over the desert. But thousands of miles later, that plane ends up in Washington, D.C. instead of New York.
Small changes, massive outcomes.
A 1 degree shift in your psychological navigation, compounded by time and repetition, completely rewires the basal ganglia. You build up enough empirical confidence to lower the fear threshold for the next, slightly larger rebellion.
You slowly accumulate the evidence that you can handle the unpredictable. This brings us full circle.
It really does.
We started this deep dive looking at the chilling realization that we are trapped in a loop of our own making. We explored the brain's perverse addiction to predictable misery, the leaky roof.
The bucket on the floor.
We looked at the illusion of the mental apology and the silent corrosive resentment that builds when we hide in the number 2 spot out of fear. We mapped the paralyzing gap between our towering pride and our total lack of confidence.
And we discovered that our suppressed envy and our inner sore loser are actually the compasses pointing toward our true potential.
Finally, we learned how to disarm the no-talent shield and began hacking the system with these micro-rebellions.
It is a radical reframing of how we view our own failures. It shifts the entire paradigm away from moral self-flagellation and toward mechanical objective self-observation.
It completely removes the shame from the equation.
It does.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with something to really chew on. Based on everything we have decoded today about this machinery, what is one final, provocative thought, perhaps something not explicitly outlined in the main theories we discussed, that can completely change how someone views the time they've already spent trapped in this loop?
I think there is a profound implication hidden in the architecture of this habit. We spend so much energy looking back at the years we lost to our avoidance patterns with immense regret.
Oh, constant regret.
We agonize over the missed opportunities, the times we stayed quiet, the years spent tending to the bucket under the leaky roof. We view all of that time as a total, irredeemable waste. But consider the function of pressure. The years spent repeating these familiar failures, accumulating that silent resentment, suppressing the inner sore loser, all of that generates massive internal pressure.
It's like building up steam in a sealed engine.
So what if your loser habit was never actually a curse? What if it was a heavily armored cocoon? A psychological structure designed by your mind to keep you safe from a world you did not yet have the tools to navigate.
A cocoon.
And what if the years you spent trapped inside it were not wasted time, but an incubation period? You were held in that familiar misery just long enough to build up the critical mass of frustration, strength, and raw, unapologetic desire required to finally shatter the armor.
Wow. That reframes everything. That chilling sensation we talked about at the very beginning. That drop in your stomach when you realize you've made the exact same mistake again.
It's not a failure.
Maybe that chill isn't a signal of your ultimate defeat. Maybe it is the exact moment you realize the cocoon is finally getting too tight. It is the moment the accumulated frustration finally outweighs the terror of the unknown.
It is the biological signal that you are finally ready to break out.
What an incredibly powerful place to land. To you, our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. I challenge you to observe your own machinery today. Watch for the moment the airbag deploys. Listen to the compass of your own envy. And when the opportunity arises, initiate just one micro-rebellion. Step out of the cocoon. Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface.